Good day, grade 11. How are you doing? That's good. Very well. Thank you for asking. So today's lesson is about the fixed asset register. So what are you going to learn in today's lesson? So after today's lesson, you will be able to understand the concept of tangible fixed assets. We use the term fixed assets. You will be able to explain the purpose and importance of an asset register. You will be able to record information in an asset register. You will be able to calculate depreciation using different methods, which is the straight line and the diminishing balance method. And you will understand the relationship between the asset register and the financial statements. Tangible fixed asset, as I've said, we use the term fixed assets, which is a tangible asset. And what is a tangible asset? Tangible means something that you can touch and that you can see with the eye. So here on the right hand side, we have a few examples of fixed assets that you can touch and see. We have buildings, machinery, which is also called equipment, and we have our vehicles, and we have different types of equipment on this example. So, what are fixed assets? So, fixed assets are usually the most valuable assets a business can own. As you can see, buildings are an example of a fixed asset, and we call buildings an investment, which is very valuable. Okay, and fixed assets have a reasonably long lifespan. We take, for example, the school building. We can all testify of how generations and generations of our families have been taught in the same school building. So assets can have a reasonably long lifespan, and assets aren't purchased with the intention to resell it, right? They are purchased with the intention to produce an income for the business. For example, we take machinery. Machinery are purchased to produce products, to sell at a profit, to produce an income for the business, right? So the three fixed assets accounts owned by a business is land and buildings, and also known as property and plant. And here we have a very good example of a plant asset, which is the Eskom plant, where they produce electricity. Okay, and then we have our vehicles account and the equipment. The depreciation puzzle. Why is it a puzzle? Let's see. Why do businesses use different depreciation methods for different assets? So when we look at the three different assets below, okay, so we have talked about buildings being an investment. So if we look at buildings as an investment, the school, right? We have this one school building that catered for educated generations of families, and if we look in a personal capacity, many families will only buy one house in their lifetime, right? So buildings have a very long lifespan. And so when we look at cars, how often do we see different models or new models being produced by the same brand of vehicle, for instance, a Volkswagen? So every year there is a new model on the market, right? And so your medical, if we look at the medical equipment advances as technology advances, right? So my mother told me when I showed her the picture, the ultrasound picture of my daughter, she told me that how amazing this experience is because in her days she didn't have that, right? So your medical equipment advances as technology advances. So grade 11, think about it. When we look at these different assets, when we look in the context of lifespan and trends and technology advancements, what are the limitations of a simple straight line method approach for all assets? Do you think it would be wise to use the simple straight line method to depreciate all these assets with their different aspects? What do you say? You are absolutely right, right? No, it is absolutely not wise to depreciate them, these different assets with the same depreciation method, right? Let's quickly look at some of the limitations of the straight line method. So we look at unevenness. Many assets don't depreciate evenly over their useful life. For example, machinery might be used more heavily in the beginning years, right, leading to a faster decline in efficiency and value early on. So the straight line method doesn't capture this. Okay, and then we look at obsolescence or outdatedness. Technological assets like computers can become outdated much faster in the early years. Why? Due to rapid advancements, right? So the straight line depreciation method doesn't account for the accelerated loss of value. And then we look at wear and tear. So some assets like vehicles might experience more significant wear and tear in the early years of heavy use, which isn't reflected in a constant depreciation expense. Okay, so let's quickly look at the straight line method. So you can tell me anything about the straight line method. Yes, of course, it is straightforward and it is also steady but have a limited view as we have just mentioned. It does not reflect reality. Why? Some assets lose their value faster in the beginning of their lifespans, as we've just mentioned. So let's quickly look at the simple example. We look at the depreciation on equipment, namely laptops, at the depreciation rate of 20% per annum. And the formula is my cost price times my depreciation rate. So my cost price is 15% and my depreciation rate is 20% per annum. So as you can see, the depreciation is exactly the same. The depreciation expense is exactly the same from the beginning until the end of the lifespan of this laptop. And we have just mentioned that economic technology are rapidly advancing. So, do you think it makes sense to depreciate these two very different assets with the same straight line method? I agree. It is absolutely not. Okay. As we've mentioned, technology advanced rapidly, and my buildings last for a very long time. So it would be wise to depreciate my buildings on the straight line method, but not my laptops. Right. Let's get to the meat of our lesson, which is the diminishing balance method. And this method reflects the real value of the asset. Okay, so a little bit of background on the diminishing balance method is also known as a reducing balance method or declining. As you can see on the graph, the value, the expense, the value of the depreciation expense is declining from year 1 to 3 and so on. So the diminishing balance method calculates depreciation on the current net book value. Current meaning what the asset is worth now, currently. Okay, and it recognizes that some assets like computers and vehicles experience a quicker decline in value at the beginning of their lifespan. Depreciation expense will be higher in the early years and lower in the later years, as illustrated in the example. So this equipment, the laptops, the depreciation expense in the first year is 3,000. In the second year, it is 2,500. In the third year, it is 2,000. And so it declines. Why the diminishing balance? As we've mentioned, it gives us a reflection of the real value of the asset in the market. Right? It calculates the rapid obsolescence or outdatedness. For example, technology becomes outdated quickly. So I've added more information for you to go through in your own time when you click on the hyperlink. Okay, and then it calculates the high initial usage of some assets. For example, vehicles. A new vehicle often experiences more wear and tear initially, and I've also added more information for you to go through when you click on the hyperlink on why certain assets like vehicles have a higher initial usage. And then lastly, it gives us an accurate reflection of the asset value. It provides a more realistic view of the asset value over time. And again, I have added more information for you to go through in your own time. Let's take a look at the diminishing balance formula. So to get your depreciation expense, you will take your net book value at the beginning of the year times your depreciation rate, which will almost always be given to you. And how do you get to your net book value? You take the original cost of your asset minus your accumulated depreciation. And who can tell me what is accumulated depreciation? Perfect.